We're holding in the Gemara Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph, about 7-8 lines from the top of the Amud, and we're going back to what it said in the Mishnah, Bim Mukdoshin Ein Akain. What did it say in the Mishnah? When it comes to a carbon Pesach, there are two parts to a carbon. There's the parts that you eat, basar, and then there's the parts that are brought in the Mizbeach. So by a carbon Pesach, if the part that you're supposed to eat became tamei, so then the carbon is pasul, because the whole point of the carbon Pesach is for eating it. But then the Mishnah said, when it comes to other mukdoshin, then it's not so. If the basar became tamei, the basar that you eat became tamei, but the chaylev that's put on the mizbeach is still good, so you can still do the zrika of the dam, and the carbon is not pasul. Zok the Gemara, Masnisin Mani, who is the Tan of our Mishnah? Rabbi Yeshua, it follows the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. And this is the Rabbi Yeshua that we've been discussing in the past two blot here, that says that you can't do the zrika of the dam and the mizbeach if there is no basar. But what the Tana here is saying is, you don't have to have necessarily basar to be able to eat. Even if you just have the chaylev for the mizbeach, you can still do the zrika. And that follows Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. We quoted this before already, but here the Gemara brings a new braisa where Rabbi Yeshua says this, and there's an additional chiddush in this braisa that the Gemara will explain. The Tanya, the braisa says, Rabbi Yeshua oime, kol azvachim shebetayre, all karbanis in the Torah, shenishtayim em kezayis basar. So if it became tamei, or the basar of the carbon became lost, but there's a kezayis left, or kezayis chaylev, or there's a kezayis of the chaylev that's put on the mizbeach is left. Zayrik is adam. So that's enough that you can do the zrika of the dam. But if there's only kechatzi zayis basar, or kechatzi zayis chaylev, if you have only a half a kezayis of basar, and a half a kezayis of chaylev, in other words, even if you actually have a half a kezayis of both, so l'chayre you would think you could combine them both together to be able to do the zrika, but no, ein zayrik is adam. You can't do the zrika and combine the half a kezayis of basar and chaylev. But when it comes to a carbon oila, what's the halacha about carbon oila? Carbon oila is fully burnt on the mizbeach. So I feel like kechatzi zayis basar, if you have a half a kezayis of the meat, and kechatzi zayis chaylev, a half a kezayis of the fats of the carbon, zayrik is adam, you can do the sprinkling of the blood on the mizbeach, because the basar and the chaylev, it's all burnt on the mizbeach together. So you combine the half a kezayis of the basar and the chaylev together, you have a full kezayis that could be still burnt on the mizbeach, so you can do the zrika. Then the Braisa concludes, when it comes to a carbon mincha, even if the whole mincha is still good, it's here, lo yizraik. You don't sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. So the Gemara is right now going to explain, what does this mean? Mincha mai avidite. What is it saying over here regarding a mincha? That if the mincha is here, you don't do zrika. Where's there a zrika of blood when it comes to a mincha? And why, if the mincha is here, do you not do the zrika? The Gemara explains what it's talking about. Rav Papa, so Rav Papa explains, minchas nisachim. What we're talking about over here is a mincha that comes as a nisachim together with a regular carbon. We're not talking about a carbon mincha that's brought separately. The mincha that's being brought together with a carbon. And what the Braisa is saying is that if the basar, the chaylev of the carbon all became tamei, or is all gone, and all you have is, you can eat something that's connected to the carbon. The mincha that's being brought with the carbon, that's still here. That is still available to be eaten. Could you do the zrika if that mincha is still here? I would think to say, why are you bringing a mincha? This mincha here, together with the carbon, it's part of the carbon. There's menachis and the sachim that are supposed to be brought together with the carbon. So kegufe the zevach dami. This mincha is like a part of the carbon itself. And therefore, if the mincha could still be eaten, even if the rest of the carbon became tameh, you could still sprinkle the blood. Kamash malan, therefore the pasuk, so therefore the braisa that is tells me that no, even if the mincha is still fit to be eaten, if the basar and the chaylev cannot, or kezayis of them cannot, so then you can't sprinkle the blood anymore. Now here the Gemara is going to bring the source and the pasuk for this. Chaylev, if only the chaylev is available, it's still good to be brought on the mizbeach. Minala, from where do I see that that's good enough that you could do the zrika of the dam and the mizbeach? Amar Rav Yechanan Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, Mataba Mishum Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, others said in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, the Amakra, because the pasuk says, V'hiktir hachelev l'reich nichayach lashem. In the beginning of that pasuk, it speaks about the zrika of the dam. It says in the beginning of that pasuk, V'zorak hakayin es adam ala mizbeach Hashem. And in the end of the pasuk, it says, V'hiktir hachelev. You bring the chelev. So what do you see from here? Chelev, as long as you can still be maktir the chelev, afal pishaim basar, although the basar became tamei, you can do the zrika of the dam. So I see over here if the fats that's brought in the mizbeach, if that's still here, you can do the zrika. But there are also other parts that are brought in the mizbeach. Yiseres hakovet, which is another section of another part of the animal. I think it's called the diaphragm. Ushtei kloyis, and the two kidneys that are also brought in the mizbeach. Minalan, from where do I know that if they are still available to be brought in the mizbeach? So heicha mrinan dizarkinan. Sorry, the Gemara minalan. So the Gemara asks the question minalan. From where do I know? Where do I see in the pasuk that you can still do the zrike? So the Gemara immediately asks, Heicha mrinan dizarkinan. How do you know that if you have only those parts, which is the yiseres hakaved and the shtei haklois, that you could actually do the zrike? In the Braisa, it only said chelev. It didn't say anything about the yiseres hakaved and the shtei haklois. So the Gemara says, Midiktani, but from the fact that the Braisa says, Uben mincha, afal pisha kula kayemes lo yizraik, that only if the mincha is the only part available, then don't do the zrika, so mincha hudulai. So that means only if it's the mincha that you can still eat, then you can't do the zrika. Alva yiseres hakaved, the shtei hakloyos, if you do have these parts of the animal, the yiseres hakaved and the kidneys, shapidami, you could still do the zrika. That's what I could understand from this Braisa. So minalam, from where do I know? Where do I see in the pasuk that it's not only the chelev? It says in the pasuk chelev. So Rabbi Yechanan the day Omar, Rabbi Yechanan himself said that the source is Omakra. The pasuk says l'reyach nichayach. Right there in that pasuk, when it says v'hikter chelev, it doesn't just say chelev. It says chelev l'reyach nichayach. Kol shatamayla l'reyach nichayach. If you're still any part of the animal that's brought on the mizbeach as a reyach nichayach, so then you could do the zrika. So it's not only the chelev. So the Torah says chelev, and then it says reyach nichayach. So we know both. Now the Gemara says, if so, why did it have to spell out chelev separately? Let it just say reyach nichayach, and that's all. The Torah had to tell you chelev, that if you have chelev available, you can do the zrika. And then it also said reyach nichayach, including even the other parts as well. If the Torah would only say chelev, then havamina chelevin. You said as a cover the shtei hakloyos loy. I would say only if the fats are being brought on the mizbeach, then you could do the zrika, and not these other parts. So therefore, kosav rachmana l'reich nichayach. The Torah adds l'reich nichayach to say that as long as there's any part that could still be brought on the mizbeach, you can do the zrika. V'kosav rachmana l'reich nichayach. On the other hand, if the Torah would say reich nichayach, havamina kol ha'oilin l'reich nichayach. If there's anything in connection to this carbon that could still be brought as a reich nichayach, and va'afila mincha, that includes even the mincha where there's a kmitza that's brought on the mizbeach, that also allows you to do the zrika. So therefore, kosav rachmana chelev, the Torah writes chelev, that it has to be something that's like the chelev, which is part of the animal itself, and not the mincha, which is brought with the animal, but it's not part of the animal itself. Zok the Mishnah. Here we go back to the halacha of a korban pesach that became tomei, and this is actually the Mishnah that's the halacha, the actual source of the halacha itself regarding a pesach that's brought betumah. So nitma kohol, if the congregation is tomei, everybody, all of Klal Yisrael became tomei, oy rubai, or most of Klal Yisrael became tomei. And Rashi keeps on bringing the example. The Gemara brought it actually before. That how could such a thing happen if the Nasi passes away and there's a Levaya that all of Klal Yisrael is obligated to attend, and everybody became Tomei, or most of Klal Yisrael became Tomei. Oy shahayu hakayanim tmeim, or even if the Yidden are not Tomei, but the Kayanim doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, they are Tomei. So they have to do the Avodah, and they're going to make the korban Tomei. V'akol tahirim, even if everyone else is Tomei. Yasu betumah, the korban Pesach is done betumah. Nitmam miyatakol, if only a minority of Yidden are tamei, so then at tahirin oisen esarishain. Those that are tahir do the first korban Pesach. Vatmein, and those that are tamei, that are the majority, again, that are the ones that are tamei, that are the minority, oisen esasheni. They will do the korban Pesach sheni. Right. So this is the halacha that. Tumah chuya b'tzibur or hutra b'tzibur. That's if you have most of the people that are tamei. But if a minority is tamei, they're pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. We had the pasuk before the Gemara brought ish nitchel Pesach Sheni and not kohol. Only the minority is pushed off, and not if it's most of the Yidden. Tan Rabbanon and Abraisa we learned this halacha of the Mishnah, and the Braisa actually adds another detail here. Harei Shai Yisrael Tmeim, if Yidden are tamei, a Kainim the Klisharis Tahirim. The Kainim, the Klisharis in the Beis HaMikdash are Tahir. Oy Shai Yisrael Tahirim, the Yidden are Tahir, a Kainim Klisharis Tmeim. The Kainim and the Klisharis are all tamei. Or Vafili Yisrael, Vik Kainim Tahirim, in a case where you have the Yidden and the Kainim, they're all Tahir, but here there's a case where the Klisharis are Tmeim. The Klisharis are tamei. Yasu Betumah. Everybody does. In all of these cases, the carbon Pesach is brought Betumah for the entire Klal Yisrael. Now the Braisa adds and explains, you have a case where you have the majority of Klal Yisrael is tamei, and the carbon for them is brought Betumah, but you still have the Kainim that are Tahir, and for the minority, it's possible to bring the carbon Pesach Betara. But the Braisa here is saying, I bring the carbon Pesach Betumah for everybody, even if there is a minority that's Tahir. And the reason is, she'ein carbon tzibur cholok. We don't make a distinction in a carbon tzibur. If the carbon tzibur is being brought for the majority, betumah, even for the minority that is tahir, I don't put them in a separate category that they should bring it betara. It's brought for everybody betumah, everybody together.
It's because the vessels are tamei.
Well, whether the vessels are tamei, whether the case where the majority of Klal Yisrael is tamei and the minority is tahir, and they could theoretically bring it separately, betara. You bring it for everybody together, betuma. And the reason that Rishonim say is because if you're going to separate and bring some betuma and some betara, so it's going to look like that those that are bringing betuma are like second-class citizens. Their carbon pesach is not like fully 100% good. The other people that are tahir are staying away from them and are bringing it separately. In order to demonstrate the fact that the Torah said that you can bring it betuma, so everybody brings it together. We don't make a chiluk in the carbon tzibur when part of Klal Yisrael is tamei and bringing it betuma. Now going into this case that the Braisa here spoke about, that when the klisharis is tamei, you bring the carbon pesach betuma. So leishanu, this wasn't said, elo shenitma hasakin. If the knife that's being used for the shchita became betamei, mace, it became tamei of tmei mace, so that the klisharis that we're talking about that was tamei is the knife. So then the kainim use this knife and they can be tamei themselves. They don't have to be careful with any of the tumah, and even if they become tamei themselves, they bring the carbon. The Rachmana asks, now why dafka the knife? What's unique about the knife? Because the knife is metal, and the Torah says regarding metal, Halal cherev, that there's a cherev, a sword that that killed a person and becomes tamei. What do you learn out from this pasuk? We had it a few times before. Cherev harehu kacholol. A sword, or for that matter, any metal, has the same status as the mace himself, and therefore this knife that touched a person that's tamei becomes an av hatumah, like what he touched itself. Usually, what's the halach if you touch an av hatumah? You become a rishon l'tumah. You don't have the same status as tumah as what you touched. By metal, it has the same level of tumah as what it touched. Now, what's the significance of that? Become a tameh legavra. An avat tumah could make a person tameh. Something which is a rishon l'tumah does not make a person tameh. But an avat tumah, which is what the knife would be, the knife when it becomes tameh, it becomes an avat tumah. If it touches a tmei mace, so the knife will make a person tameh. So the meikare ki misavid betumas aguf the kares kamisavid. So when a kain is going ahead and using this knife, which is already tamei, ba'ava tumah, the kain himself becomes tamei. So therefore, you can do the entire carbon pesach betumah. Avol nitma sakin betumas sheretz. How about if the knife became tamei, not with a tumas mace, and therefore becomes an avatumah? No, it became tamei betumas sheretz. So what happens if it becomes tamei with a tumas sheretz? The knife is only a rishon l'tumah. The halacha of a rishon l'tumah is it does not make a person tamei. So the kain using this knife does not become tamei. It only makes the meat that it shechts tamei. The lebasaru the metamyele. The meat it makes tamei. Legavra le metamyele. The kain himself does not become tamei from this knife. So to hide in of it, the kain should see to it that he should be careful to remain tahir when he does the carbon pesach. Tamei and loyavet, he should not make the carbon pesach while he's tamei. Why is that? Even though the meat of the carbon is anyways going to be tamei, but there's a big difference if the meat is tamei or if the Kayin himself becomes Tameh. Why? Mutiv yochal betumis basar. It's better to just eat it while the basar is Tameh and the person is not, because it's belav. That issur of eating the Korban Pesach if the basar is Tameh is only a lav. V'al yochal basar betumis aguf, and do not eat the basar when the Kayin or the Yidden themselves become Tameh. Shehu bekaris. If you eat a Korban Pesach and not only the basar is Tameh, but the person that's eating it is Tameh, that's karis. If you're eating it when you're Tameh, you're not supposed to, so then it's karis. So therefore, you should minimize the level of the tumah as much as possible. That only the basar should be tameh and not the person. Now the Gemara concludes based on this, what Rav Chisda just said here. Alma, I see that Kasav Rav Chisda, that Rav Chisda's opinion is, going back to the discussion we had before in the Gemara regarding tumah, the chuyehi b'tzibur. The fact that you could bring a Korban Pesach when you're tameh, it's pushed off with difficulty, meaning you have to make as much as an effort possible to do it b'tara as much as possible. Because in this case, if we would say tumah hutra b'tzibur, that once it's tameh, it's totally hutra, so then it wouldn't matter what level of tumah it is, whether it's the basar which is tameh, whether it's the person it's tameh, it's totally hutra. Elamai tchuya, it's only pushed off with difficulty, and therefore, as much as you can minimize the level of the tumah, you have to minimize it. Rabbi Yitzchak said the same thing. Tumah tchuya hi b'tzibur. The tumah is only pushed off, and as much as you can minimize it, you have to. Rava disagrees with what Rav Chisda said, and Rava says that even if the knife became tameh from tumas sheretz, and only the basar is becoming tameh, it doesn't matter. The person, the kohen, doesn't have to be careful, and the kohen himself could become tameh as well. And not because he held tumah hutra b'tzibur, but Rava brings a pasuk for this. Rava says, afile tmeyin nami avdi. If the knife became tameh, even with a tumas sheretz, the kohen could do it while he's tameh. My time, what's the reason? Because we see in the pasuk where the pasuk compares the two. The chsiv, the pasuk says, "V'habasa sheyiga b'chol tameh lo yochal." When the basar becomes tameh, don't eat it. Be'esh yisaref, you have to burn it. And then it says, "V'habasar kol tar yochal basar." The basar of a carbon, only a person which is tired eats the basar. So in the same pasuk, it talks about the meat not becoming tameh and the person not being tameh. So we compare the two. If it's a case where this halacha that the meat, which is tameh, you shouldn't eat it, does not apply because the Korban Pesach, the kayanim are tameh, and the sakin that is, the sakin is tameh, and the basar is anyways going to be tameh, and the Torah allows you to eat the basar b'tumeh. So when that section of the pasuk doesn't apply, so like karina be va'abasa kol tar yechal basar. So I also don't apply what it says that the person has to be careful to only eat it betara. Kol heche the karina be, and where it does apply va'abasa sheyiga b'chol tameh lo yechal, that you have to be careful that the basar itself shouldn't be tameh. Then karina be va'abasa kol tar yechal basar. Then we also apply the fact that the person has to be careful that he shouldn't be tameh. So these two things go together. Once the basar itself is tameh, the knife touched the basar, it's tameh, so then the person himself doesn't have to be careful anymore. So that's where Rava disagrees with Rav Chisda. Now the Gemara starts a new inyan connected to what it said here in our Mishnah. No, he doesn't hold Hutra. He holds it's Chuya B'tzibur, but nevertheless there's a pasuk here that's comparing the two. Itmar, now the Gemara brings a machlokes in connection to what we said in the Mishnah, that if most of Klal Yisrael is Tameh, you can bring the Korban Pesach while you're Tameh. So the question is, Harei Shehoy Yisrael Mechzet Tahirin or Mechzet Tmein. What happens if it's exactly half and half? So what's the halacha now? Is it like Roiv that are Tameh? Is it like Roiv that are Tahir? What do we do? Rav Amarav says, Mechza al Mechze Keroiv. That half and half, it's going to be considered to be like Roiv. And the Gemara in a second will explain what that means. What do you do when we say that it's like Roiv? Rav Kahana says, Mechza al Mechze, if it's half and half, Eina Keroiv. It's not like the majority became Tameh. So the Gemara explains, Rav Amar Mechza al Mechze Keroiv, the half and half, it's like Roiv. What this means is, each half is treated like Roiv. So halalu oisin la'atzman, the roiv that are tamei, bring it separately, bring the Korban Pesach Rishon themselves, and the reason why they could bring the Pesach Rishon is because even though they're only half, but they're like roiv, so they can bring the Korban Pesach. And the halalu oisin la'atzman, and the ones that are tahir have to bring it separately. Why? Because I treat the ones that are tahir, that half which is tahir, also to be like roiv, and if they're the roiv, so then they're not allowed to become tamei. They're the roiv, and the ones that are tamei are the miyat, so they have to bring the Korban Pesach betara. So I treat each half as if they are the roiv, and they both bring the Korban Pesach rishon, but separately. Rav Kahana says, Mechzal mechza einay keroiv. When it's half and half, it's not like roiv. So therefore, the Tahayrin, they're the minority. We treat them like the minority. So Tahayrin, Aysan Asarishain, the Tahayrin bring the first carbon Pesach, like the halacha always is, even when the Tahayrin are in the minority, they still bring the first carbon Pesach. Utmein, Aysan Asasheni. The Tmein are treated as a minority. What happens if the Tmein are in the minority? You push them off to the Pesach Sheni. That's what Rav Kahana holds. Now there's another opinion in explaining what Rav Kahana said, that what Rav Kahana said was that if it's mechza einay keroiv, so each half is not treated like roiv, and therefore he said Tahayrin Aysan Asarishain. Just like we said before, that Tahayrin bring the first carbon Pesach because even the minority brings, when you're tired, the carbon Pesach. But Tmein, now this Lashon says that the Tmein actually are going to be stuck. They can't bring neither of the karbanis. They can't bring not the first carbon Pesach and not the second carbon Pesach. Why not? They can't bring the first carbon Pesach because they're not a Raiv. They're treated like a minority. So the minority is Tommy. They can't bring the first carbon Pesach. They're not Raiv. However, they also don't bring the carbon Pesach of the Pesach Sheni. They're also not a miyut. They're half. What are they? They're half. If they're half, so then they have a problem. They can't bring the carbon Pesach Rishon because only if the Roiv of the Tzibur is Tommy, you bring the carbon Pesach Rishon. They're not a Roiv. They're only half. They also can't bring the carbon Pesach Sheni because only a miyut of Klal Yisrael that's Tommy is pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. And they're not a miyut. They're half. So therefore, they can't bring neither. So we have three opinions over here regarding this case.
What do they do?
They don't bring the carbon Pesach that year.
That's the definition
Yeah.
of year.
Okay, so that's a discussion in Mefarshim whether when you count Klal Yisrael by the first carbon Pesach, do you count them over by the second carbon Pesach again to see if they're still half and half, or maybe the number changed? We'll see. In the Gemara is soon going to.
Same on the F the Torah. They're still not Roiv. They should also not do the.
So, but the carbon Pesach of people that are tired, even if they're in the minority, they bring the Pesach Rishon. They're tired. Tired brings no matter what, even if they're in the minority. Zok the Gemara, let's see what it said in our Mishnah. Does it fit with Rav's opinion or Rav Kahana's opinion? Tanan in the Mishnah we learned it said, Nit mekal, if the congregation is all Tameh, oy ruboy, or most of Yidden are Tameh, oy shahayu akainim tmeim, or the kainim were Tameh, va'akal tairim, and the Yidden are tired. So what did it say? Yaseh betumah. Then you bring the carbon Pesach betumah. That's the Mishnah. So what do you see over here? Ruboy, hu de avdi betumah. Only if most of Klal Yisrael is Tameh, then it's done betumah. Aval palgo palge, but you can understand from our Mishnah, but if it's half and half, lo yavdi birishin. They don't bring the carbon Pesach Rishon. Kashil Rav, it's a question on Rav that said that even the half that are Tameh are treated like Rav and they bring the Pesach Rishon. Amalach Rav will answer you, no, that's not how you have to be medayik the Mishnah. Be medayik as follows. Ruba of the kulhu. If most of Klal Yisrael is Tameh, so then of the kulhu betumah. They all do it together betumah. Everybody together will do it betumah. Palga, but if it's a case that it's exactly half and half, that's different. Over here, halalu oisin la'atzman, v'halalu oisin la'atzman. They have to bring it separately. They all could bring the carbon Pesach Rishon. However, it's not the same as the case of the Mishnah because I have to divide it. Each one has to do it separately. That's the diak of the Mishnah. It's logical to learn the Mishnah this way because the Tani Seifa, in the Seifa of the Mishnah it said, Nitma miyutakol, if the minority of the Tzibur became Tameh, so then Tahayra Naisan Asarishain, the Tahayra do the first carbon Pesach, Tmein Naisan Asashani, and the Tmein, which are the minority, will do the second carbon Pesach. So what do you see from here? Miyut hudavdi b'sheni. Only if the people that became Tameh are the miyut, then I push them off to the second Pesach. Aval palga. Loi, when it comes to half and half, I don't push them off to the second Pesach, to the Pesach Sheni. And what do? Va'avdi birishain. In the case of palga, even the ones that are Tameh do bring the first carbon Pesach. V'halalo oisan la'atzman. Like Rav said, that the ones that are Tameh also bring it, but they bring it separate from the ones that are Tahir. So from the Seifa of the Mishnah, I see, like Rav's opinion, only the minority gets pushed off to the Pesach Sheni, not if it's half and half. Says the Gemara, so if I can be medayik from the Seifa of the Mishnah like Rav, the Ella kashil Rav Kahana. So the Seifa of the Mishnah is a question of Rav Kahana. Seifa of the Mishnah says only the minority gets pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. Rav Kahana said that even in the case of palga, they get pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. Amalach Rav Kahana, so Rav Kahana tells you the way you have to be medayik from the seif of the Mishnah is nitmu miyat hakol. If the miyat of the kol became tomei, so tahayre naisan esarishain, the ones that are tar do the first carbon pesach, utmein that are the minority aisan esasheni. They do the carbon pesach sheni. Now, how are you medayik from the Mishnah? Ho palge, but if it's half and half, tahayre naisan esarishain, the ones that are tar do the first carbon pesach. Aval tamein ein naisan loy esarishain v'loy esasheni. They will not bring not the first carbon pesach and not the second carbon pesach because they're exactly half, so they can't bring not the first and not the second. So the Gemara says, okay, this explains how Rav Kahana in the second Lashon, Rav Kahana. This was the opinion of Rav Kahana and the second interpretation of Rav Kahana's opinion. So we understand how he would be medayik from our Mishnah. But Elo lahach lishna the Amar Rav Kahana. But according to the first version, that Rav Kahana said, to hayren eisen es arishain, utmeyen eisen es asheni, in a case where it's half and half, the Tmein do bring the Pesach Sheni, Ma'ikalamema. How does that fit with what it said in the Mishnah, that only if the minority are Tmein, you bring the Pesach Sheni? So Amalach Rav Kahana tells you that the seif of the Mishnah is taka not precise. You can't be medayik from it. Hu adin, the truth is, the afila palga nami, even if it would be half and half, the halacha would also be to hayden eisen esarishain, et tmein eisen esasheni. That the hayden bring the first carbon pesach and the tmein are pushed off to the second carbon pesach. Why in the seif of the Mishnah does it only say this din if the minority became tamei? That's because it wants to be uniform to what it said in the Reisha. I did the Tani Reisha Rubai, Tananami Seifim Miyutai. Since in the Reisha it spoke about a case where the Raiv became Tomei, and they bring the carbon Pesach Risha, and so in the Seif of the Mishnah, it says that if it's the Miyut, they're pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. So it's sort of following the terminology used in the Reisha, but it's really not precise. Really, it also applies by Palge. If it's half and half, the half that are Tomei are pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. Okay, so we have three opinions over here, Rav, and two opinions in what Rav Kahana said. And now the Gemara is going to bring three brises, and in each one of these brises, one it says like Rav, and the other two it says like the two opinions of Rav Kahana. And the Gemara will explain these three brises according to all opinions. Tanya Kvasei de Rav, in one brise it says clearly like Rav, Tanya Kvasei de Rav Kahana, Ketrei Lishni. And we also learned in another two brises like the two versions of Rav Kahana's opinion. Tanya Kvasei de Rav, in one brise it said like Rav, Hoy Yisrael mechzet tayr and mechzet mein, if it was half and half, like Rav said, Halalo eisen latzman, V'halalo eisen latzman. They all bring the Pesach Rishain, each one separately. Tanya Kalishna Kamed de Rav Kahana, we also learned like the first lashon of Rav Kahana, Hareish Hoy Yisrael mechzet tayr and mechzet mein, when it's half and half, Tehayren eisen es Rishain, the Tehayren bring the first carbon Pesach, Tmein eisen es Hasheni. The Tmein are treated as the minority, and they bring the Pesach Sheni, like the first lashon of Rav Kahana. Tanya Kalishna Basra de Rav Kahana, and we also learned like the second version of Rav Kahana, Reish Ho Yisrael Mechzet Hayren Mechzet Tmein, when it's half and half, to Hayren Eisen es Arishain, and Tmein Astok, Einen Eisen Loyes Arishain, Veloyes Asheni. Since they're half, they're not treated like the majority, they're not treated like the minority, they can't bring in either of the Karbonis Pesach that year. So we have these three brises here. So now the Gemara will explain how these three brises fits with each one of the opinions. Now, according to Rav, and according to the second version of Rav Kahana, this that it says in the Braise, to hayren eisen es arishain, utmein eisen es hasheni. That the tmein, that when it's half and half, they're pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. How does the heichim mitartzila? How do they answer this according to their opinion? So the Gemara here will explain the basis of the next piece in the Gemara here is based on the status of women when it comes to a carbon Pesach. There's a big machlokes regarding women and the carbon Pesach. Are they obligated to bring the carbon Pesach or not? We're going to learn later in the Gemara there's a machlokes about this, and there's actually three opinions. One opinion is that they're totally potter. Another opinion is that they're chayiv in the Pesach Rishain and not in the Pesach Sheni. And another opinion is that they're chayiv both in the Pesach Rishain and in the Pesach Sheni. So now when it comes to counting Klal Yisrael, to seeing what the number is, are the majority Tahayrin, are the majority Tmein, or is it half and half? So do we include women in this count, or do we not include women in this count? So that's going to be the point that will be the difference in the cases of this Braise here. So the case is, Kagayin, Shahoy, Yisrael, Mechzet Tahayrin, or Mechzet Tmein. The count is half and half, as the Braise says. But how does it come to half and half? The only reason the Tmeim are exactly half, like the Tahayrin, is because of the women. Combining the women, they bring it to half. If not for the women, the Tmeim would be in the minority. Ukesavar, the Tana of this Braisa holds, Nashim B'Rishayin Rishus. The Nashim, to bring the first carbon Pesach, they're not obligated. It's only a Rishus for them. If they can join if they want, but they're not obligated. So therefore, Dal Nashim Mitmein. You have to really exclude the women from the count of the Tmein. So it's really not half and half. V'havalu Tmein Miyuta. So the Tmein are really in the minority. Miyuta Yitchul Pesach Sheni. So therefore the Braisa says that in this case, the Tmein are pushed off to the Pesach Sheni, even though it said it's half and half. Because it was only half and half together with the women. And the women are not really chayav in Pesach Sheni. So the Tmein are in the minority. That's the pshat in this Braisa that would fit even according to Rav and the Lishna Basra of Rav Kahana.
So they go for the Pesach Sheni.
Huh?
They go to the Pesach Sheni.
No, if they don't bring the Pesach Rishon, they're not obligated in Pesach Sheni either, the women. No. But the miyutin of the ones that are Tomei, they go to the Pesach Sheni. Rav, Rav Kahana, and according to Rav, and according to the first version of Rav Kahana, the Tanya, so the other Braisa that said, Tahayrin Aysin Esarishain, the Tahayrin bring the first carbon Pesach, or Tumein, and the Tumein Ein Aysin Loyas Arishain Veloyas Asheni. The Tumein can't bring neither of the Karbanis Pesach. How do they answer this Braisa? So here again the Gemara brings another kind of scenario where it's the women that are included in the count. So Rav Mitaratzla, the way Rav would answer this is Kagain Shahoy Yisrael Mechzet Tumein and Mechzet Tahayrin. It was half and half like the Braisa says. But that's only if you don't count the women. Then it's half and half. But v'nashim oitvayis ala tahirim. If you do count the women, so then the tahirim will be the majority. V'kasavar, and what does the Tana of this Braisa hold? His opinion is nashim birishain chayva. The women are obligated to bring the first carbon Pesach. Ubisheni rishos. But they don't have the option. They're not obligated to bring the carbon Pesach Sheni. So therefore what happens is as follows. Birishain layavdi, when it comes to the first carbon Pesach, they will not bring it, the ones that are Tomei, that is, do not bring it. Why? The Havilei Miyuta, because they're in the minority. The only reason it was half and half is because you included the women. If you don't include the women, so then, if you don't include the women, again, the only reason why it was half and half is because you don't include the women. If you do include the women, so then the Tahayrin are the majority and the Tumein are in the minority. And again, this Tana holds that the women are to be counted by the first carbon Pesach, because for the first carbon Pesach, the women are obligated. So the ones that are Tomei, that are in the minority, if you include the women, so you don't bring the carbon Pesach Rishon. But the people that are Tamei cannot bring the carbon Pesach Sheni, because when it comes to the Pesach Sheni, we don't count the women. Dal Nashim Minayu, since the women are not obligated in the carbon Pesach Sheni, you have to exclude them from the count. V'havalu palga palga. When it comes to the Pesach Sheni, it's going to be half and half. Palga layavdi b'sheni. If it's half, they don't bring the carbon Pesach Sheni. That's Rav's opinion. When it's half, you really were supposed to bring the carbon Pesach Rishon, because you consider it to be like Raiv. So therefore they become stuck. When it comes to the Pesach Rishon, the Tmein are considered to be in the minority because you have to include the women in the count, because women are obligated in the Pesach Rishon. Comes to the Pesach Sheni, you don't include the women in the count, so therefore they become half and half, and they can't bring the Pesach Sheni. That's what the Braisa says. They don't bring neither. That's the explanation according to Rav's opinion. Ula Rav Kahana that said Palga Nami of the Bisheni, that if it would be half and half, you would bring the Pesach Sheni. So how does he answer this Braisa? So similar with the case is a little bit different. Hachi mitaritzlo. This is how he answers it. Kagain Shah Yisrael Mechzet Tahayrin Mechzet Mein. The Yidden were exactly half and half. But how do they come to half and half? V'nashim ashlimais l'tahayrin. They're only half and half together with the women. Ukesavar, and now exactly like Rav said before, the Tana of the Braisa holds nashim birishain chayva. The women in the first carbon Pesach, they are obligated. Ubisheni rishus, and in the carbon Pesach sheni, they're not obligated. So therefore birishain lo yavdi, in the carbon Pesach rishain, so the ones that are tamei do not bring the carbon. The havalu palga, because together with the women, they're half and half. And by the carbon Pesach rishain, you have to include the women, and they're half and half. The opinion of Rav Kahana is that if it's half and half, you don't bring the carbon Pesach Rishon. Now when it comes to the carbon Pesach Sheni, they don't bring the carbon, even though Rav Kahana usually holds that Palga does get pushed off to the Pesach Sheni, because Dal Nosheminayu, when it comes to the Pesach Sheni, since the women are not obligated, so you have to exclude the women from the count, Minat Tahayrin, so Havalu Tamei and Ruba. Now the Tamei are the Raiv, and Veruba Layav the B'Sheni, and Raiv does not fulfill, does not bring the Pesach Sheni. So therefore this Braisa fits according to that opinion of Kahana. Now the Gemara brings the last Braisa that we quoted before, Ula Rav Kahana. According to Rav Kahana, the Tanya, the Braisa that says, Harei Shahoy Yisrael, Mechze Tehoirin, and Mechze Tmein, if it's half and half, Halalu Eisen La'atzmon, V'halalu Eisen La'atzmon. So it said exactly like Rav's opinion that the Tmein bring it, and they bring it separately by the Pesach Rishon. Heichi Mitaretz Lo, how does he answer this Braisa? So here, the Gemara does not have a scenario to explain this according to Rav Kahana, whether you include women or not. And here the Gemara says, Amalach Rav Kahana Tanoihi. Rav Kahana will tell you, look, you have a few Braisa here. So you have to say that this is a machlokes tanoim. Iklam andama. There's one opinion that says mechza al mechza keroiv, that when it's half and half, it's like roiv, like Rav's opinion, and the ones that are tamei do bring the Pesach Rishon separately. And the iklam andama, and then there's another brayse as we had before, mechza al mechza ain't a keroiv, that when it's half and half, it's not like roiv, and therefore they don't bring the Pesach Rishon, they bring the Pesach Sheni, like Rav Kahana's opinion.